I'm joining you this morning with Joe Glassman, Campaign Against Antisemitism's Head of Political and Government Investigations, Adam Wagner and Derek Spitz, our Specialist Counsel of Doughty Street Chambers and One Essex Court, respectively. I'm Gideon Falter, I'm Chief Executive of Campaign Against Antisemitism. For many, many months, we, as complainant in the Equality and Human Rights Commission's investigation, have been unable to comment on the investigation and the report that the EHRC, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, has just published. It has been an extraordinarily difficult time for British Jews. It's hard not to think about the fact that a year ago, many of us were questioning our place in this country. We were questioning whether or not in 2021, we would still feel safe living as Jews in this country. According to the polling that was carried out last year, about 47% of us were actually considering our future in the country. It's important just to let that sink in for a moment. For many of us, the sorely needed response to this crisis has been British justice, and today, British justice has been dispensed. I'm going to start off just by reading a statement that we have prepared in response to the report. We're then going to hear from Joe Glassman about how we came to this day, and we're going to discuss with Adam and Derek the legal analysis of the report that we have undertaken. I'll start by reading the statement that we have prepared. The Equality and Human Rights Commission's report is a groundbreaking document. It is the first ever finding by the Equality and Human Rights Commission of unlawful acts. It heavily criticizes the Labour Party's former leadership. It makes clear recommendations that there is zero tolerance of anti-Semitism in the party in future, and it provides a robust framework for ensuring that the party complies. The EHRC's report is utterly vindicative of British Jews who were accused of lying and exaggerating, acting as agents of another country and using their religion to smear the Labour Party. In an unprecedented finding, it concludes that those who made such accusations broke the law and were responsible for illegal discrimination and harassment. The debate is over. Under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, the Labour Party became institutionally anti-Semitic. It drove almost half of British Jews to consider leaving the country. For 5 miserable years, every effort to compel Labour to reform failed. We were left with no choice but to refer the party to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which launched an investigation with us as complainant. The EHRC's findings and recommendations today that Labour's leadership and culture created an unlawful environment that discriminated against Jews closely align with the hundreds of pages of evidence and argument that we submitted to the EHRC over many months. Frankly, this report would not be much different had it been written ourselves. This is the dispensing of British justice that British Jews have sorely awaited, but it has been denied for too long. Jeremy Corbyn and those around him who took part in or enabled the gaslighting, harassment, and victimization of Britain's Jewish community are shamed for all time. Those who defended and stood by them are shown to have made possible the closest flirtation that mainstream British politics has ever had with anti-Semitism in modern history. Sir Keir Starmer now has a long list of reforms to make, including establishing an independent disciplinary process so that those who put Britain's Jews in fear of their future in this country can be held to account for their deeds. To that end, we are submitting complaints against Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, and 14 other sitting MPs, and have given Labour 6 months to conduct transparent investigations and finally deliver justice for the Jewish community. Finally, we're immensely grateful to everyone who fought alongside us for this day to come. Too many of them have suffered greatly for their principles. They are the best of our country. Joe, I'd like to invite you as one of them to give us a little bit of background briefly on how we arrived at this day, and then we'll be taking questions and discussing the legal analysis of the report with Adam Wagner and Derek Spitz.
Thanks, Gideon. I'm Joe Glassman, former Labour Party member and head of political and government investigations at CAA. My role has been to lead a brilliant team investigating and compiling the evidence for our legal team to submit to the Commission. The work has been onerous and demanding because as a registered charity, we have to go to great lengths to treat all political parties equally and to ensure that every piece of evidence we use is carefully documented and verified. So how did this all start? I remember it was in 2015 when we first saw Jeremy Corbyn gathering signatures for his leadership nomination. And as we exposed Labour's emerging anti-Semitism, I remember calling Gideon in early 2016, suggesting that Jeremy Corbyn could and should be disciplined under Labour's own rules for bringing the party into disrepute. At that time, much of the Jewish community was too stunned or in denial to act, and some in the Labour Party were convinced they could somehow persuade Jeremy Corbyn and those around him to change their ways and prevent Labour's descent into the grip of anti-Semitism. But at CAA, we could see very clearly early on that this was not going to be the case. And for that, we were sometimes vilified, but we persevered. Had CAA not acted as early as we did to submit complaints, the EHRC might still have not investigated by now. What made the critical difference was that we were 1, if not 2 years ahead in recognising that Labour had become institutionally anti-Semitic and that Corbyn himself was an anti-Semite. So we eventually submitted 3 complaints against Corbyn. Our first in 2016 was ignored, so we made our second and third complaints in 2018. We held a rally outside Labour HQ at which 1,000 people co-signed complaints that we hand-delivered. Jenny Formby could not ignore those 1,000 complaints. Instead, she wrote back to us, refusing to investigate at all. And that was the final piece of evidence we needed to submit to the EHRC. There in black and white, political interference in the disciplinary process, resulting in a refusal to investigate exhaustively documented allegations of anti-Semitism by a member, because that member was Jeremy Corbyn. Finally, we'll be focusing on the report today, but for anyone who's interested in the work of the Political and Government Investigations Unit, we publish our case files on our website at antisemitism.org/politics. And what you'll find there is a potent reminder of the dangerous degree to which Jew hatred has infiltrated our political system.
Thank you very much, Joe. So before we go into questions and answers, I'd like to go to Adam and Derek to talk a little bit about their analysis, their legal analysis of the report, and then we'll go to question and answers shortly after.
Thank you, Gideon and Joe, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to say something. The first thing I wanted to do is just pay a tribute to Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. I remember having a phone call from Gideon, I think in the summer of 2018, to see if I was interested in working on a submission to the Commission. And at the time, I was desperate to try and find some sort of legal route to identify what was going on, because, you know, obviously it had reached a crisis point. And throughout the over 2 years since, we've worked together very closely. We've put in hundreds of pages of submissions. We've thought very carefully about how to do it. And I think the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism has acted very professionally and rigorously in doing that. And I pay tribute for that. I think a lot of what's in this report is a result of that. And I think I just want to highlight a few points legally, which I think are really important. I agree this is a vindication for what was being said by the mainstream Jewish community throughout. And indeed, it's reflects very much if you know, when we put out in our original submission back in 2018, we said this fundamentally was about 3 things. It was about culture, leadership, and process. And that's exactly what the report has concluded. And we made another detailed submission about a difficult issue of this denialism, which we said goes to the heart of what was going on and what raised it above ordinary anti-Semitism as we've been used to, this culture of blaming Jews, calling smears, witch hunts, and all that, which we said was inherently part of the discrimination and harassment which Jewish people were facing. It was kind of, I think we described it as a centrifuge where it created more and more anti-Semitism because it built up more conspiracy theories about Jewish actors trying to bring down the leadership and that kind of thing. And that's exactly what the commission has found. And in fact, I'm just going to read a quote. It says the Labour Party breached the Equality Act by committing unlawful harassment through acts of its agents. In 2 of the complaints we investigated, this included using anti-Semitic tropes and suggesting that complaints of anti-Semitism were fake or smears. And, you know, we've seen literally, I think, thousands of instances of this fake smears, witch hunt language. And the commission has now made a legal finding that is anti-Semitism, that is harassment. I think it's also important to understand the structure of the report. They took out 70 complaints of the very, very many hundreds, if not thousands, that have been put into the Labour Party as examples. They identified 2 which were clear harassment, which the Labour Party could be held responsible for. But they also found 28 more, which they said were borderline. And they described they said, this is by no means the full extent of the issues we identify within the files in our sample. It represents the tip of an iceberg. And I think that is very important in terms of what's been found, because this is such a wide-ranging report, and it's damning about every aspect of the way that Labour handled complaints, from the leadership down to the disciplinary processes, down to complaints, down to culture, down to training, political interference, etc., etc., etc. It really is, from page 1 to page 136, an indictment. So I think all I would say is read the reports. To anyone reading, don't take my word for it. Read the summary, read the reports. And I think, Derek, do you want to talk about the unlawful act notice and what that means and why it's important?
Thanks very much, Adam. I will do. It's unprecedented that an unlawful act notice has been issued, finding unlawful conduct by the Labour Party in the respects that we have all mentioned so far, and requiring the Labour Party to put forward a program, a remedial program, which can be enforced and which the Commission will have oversight over in response. And that is very significant. And in addition, I wanted to mention 1 or 2 other points coming out of what Adam said. The first is in relation to what a number of commentators over the years have described as something that they call the Livingston formulation. And that is the approach that is often a response when complaints of anti-Semitism are raised. The response is that rather than deal with the complaint in its substance, the bona fides of the person raising the complaint are called into question. There must be an ulterior motive. There must be some sort of hidden objective. There must be a sinister approach. This is not a genuine complaint of anti-Semitism. So goes the response. And infamously, that has been dubbed the Livingston formulation. I think that one of the things that this report does is it gives the Livingston formulation a decent burial. I think that we're unlikely to hear that sort of approach repeated in the way that it has been in the past. And that ties up with what Adam was suggesting in relation to the way the Commission has taken on the question of smearing people making these complaints. And what the Commission says about this is that the effect was to violate the dignity and to contribute to creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, or humiliating environment for Jewish people in the Labour Party and beyond. So in being able to address this issue head on, there really is something quite deep and far-reaching in what the Commission has found. That was the second point I wanted to touch on. The third relates to political interference. Again, very unusual to see a statutory body making a finding that the leadership at the time of the Labour Party have acted in a way that interferes with the integrity of the disciplinary process. But that is what the Commission has found. They have found a practice of political interference in the decision-making, which they say amounts to indirect discrimination. And they describe political interference and they define it as influencing the decision-making or taking decisions on complaints outside the established process. That is what the Commission has found in relation to the office of the leader of the opposition and their approach to disciplinary complaints. And the final point that I wanted to make relates to their findings about a failure of leadership. There, what the Commission has said in its report is that this failure of leadership enabled a culture to arise, and as the Commission describes it, that culture did not do enough, at best, did not do enough to prevent anti-Semitism. And at worst, it could be seen to accept anti-Semitism. Again, a remarkably far-reaching finding about the culture that was allowed to grow and exist within the Labour Party. So those are at least three very important findings that the Commission has made. And I think that the full ramifications of those findings will unfold over the days and weeks to come.
Thank you very much, Derek and Adam. We're going to go to questions. Just before we do, we're seeing a little bit of live reaction. We know that Sir Keir Starmer will be responding to the report at approximately 7 minutes past 11. And so we will wait to hear what he says. That is probably one of the most important things that we will see today, is what he actually commits to doing, what actions he proposes to take. There is a very sad response from Jeremy Corbyn, who still says that the problem was overstated, that it was essentially overstated for political reasons. It's a smear campaign. He is precisely one of the people that we're getting a lot of questions about, and there will be a lot of questions about in the future. The most important thing is not exactly Jeremy Corbyn, it's what the Labour Party does next. But we do need to see people like Jeremy Corbyn having action taken against them, and that's the subject of quite a lot of questions. But before we go to those questions, we're going to start off with this one. We've had a question: how do you know Keir Starmer won't just say he's going to do the right thing, but without the spectre of the EHRC report, how can he be held to account? And that ties in with another question we've had, which is, are the recommendations of the report legally enforceable? So maybe I'll just give a quick answer to that and then go to Adam and Derek for a more specific answer. The report is enforceable, and Keir Starmer really has to abide by its recommendations. These are very simple, straightforward recommendations. There are a lot of reforms that he needs to make, but there really is no choice. British justice has come, and it has been very, very clear about what has to happen next. There is a robust process for enforcing that. Just very quickly, Derek and Adam, could you just tell us what the options are for the EHRC if the Labour Party, for some reason, fails to comply, and what we would expect to happen next, particularly with regard to the action plan that's being drawn up now?
I think that the Commission is entitled to revisit Labour's conduct in the event that the action plan is not complied with. The action plan, as I understand it, requires input from the Commission in its formulation, and then is subject to review by the Commission. So the Commission has the powers to maintain an active supervisory involvement with ensuring that the action plan which they approve is in fact put into practice, and they can reopen investigation in the event that it is not.
Thank you. And also probably worth mentioning is that the complaints that we're putting in against Jeremy Corbyn and 15 other sitting MPs carry a 6-month deadline and will hopefully be now dealt with under the independent disciplinary process that the Equality and Human Rights Commission has called for. We've had quite a few people asking whether we're happy with the report. I think it's, from my point of view, if Joe Glassman is happy, then I'm happy, generally speaking, on the Labour Party and anti-Semitism in politics. I think it's probably a question we can all answer in one word. But Joe, are you happy with the report?
Yes, I'm pleased with the findings of the Commission. I think, as Derek outlined, and Adam, the significance of the Livingston formulation now being accepted as a form of anti-Semitism is very significant as well. I think what's important is that this all started with a complaint about Jeremy Corbyn, but it won't end with Jeremy Corbyn. Nevertheless, what the Commission's done allows us to bring disciplinary complaints, new and fresh complaints about Jeremy Corbyn and those other sitting MPs, in a way that allows the Jewish community to see justice being transparently done. So yes, I'm pleased.
We've had questions from some of the journalists who are watching, asking us what was submitted to the Commission and what the roles were of various people who spoke to the Commission during its investigation. We won't be at this point publishing our submissions to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, but what was sent into them was a vast amount of evidence and argument about the systematic harassment, discrimination, victimization that was taking place within the Labour Party. And as far as the different roles, we've had questions about how exactly this unfolded. We began speaking to the Equality and Human Rights Commission in 2017. Following the Labour Party's refusal to investigate our third complaint against Jeremy Corbyn, we made the referral to the Equality and Human Rights Commission in 2018. And that referral then triggered the investigation, which the statutory investigation, which the Equality and Human Rights Commission undertook. Frankly, there were a huge number of people in the Jewish community that were responsible for this happening. And to everybody from within the Labour Party, everybody who from without the Labour Party documented and evidenced what they had been subjected to by the Labour Party, whether they submitted it to the Commission or not, you all made a huge difference in ensuring that this day could come. Once we made our referral, there were various other submissions that were made to the Commission by others, including Labour Against Anti-Semitism, the Jewish Labour Movement, and other activist groups. And all of those submissions assisted our referral and the evidence and argument that we were making to the Commission. So really, to everybody who had input into the process that the Commission has run, thank you very much. I think we've probably got time for maybe one last question. Did the Chakrabarti report help or hinder Labour's processes, has been asked by a member of the press. Adam and Derek, do you want to quickly respond to that?
I can respond to that. Well, I mean, what we said about the Chakrabarti report in our very first submission was, first of all, it's not very good, and it wasn't very good because it was vague and it made some bad recommendations, but also some good recommendations. But the key point about it was the Labour Party didn't implement the recommendations, and that's basically what the Commission has said, that it wasn't just the Chakrabarti report. There were a number of other reports, the Royal Report, the Home Affairs Committee report, and Labour simply didn't act on them. That's one of the big criticisms the Commission makes about what was happening. And I think that's probably the basis of the finding about leadership, that it's hard to conclude it was that the leadership did everything, and in fact seemed not to be taking it seriously, or to that effect. And I think that it's because they knew what they had to do, but they couldn't do it because it implicated some of the key political allies. That's certainly my analysis.
Joe, is there anything you'd like to add briefly?
No, I think Adam summed it up very well. I think that we were dogged in our investigative team the entire time by the Chakrabarti report's recommendations, because they did not allow transparency and for us to see what actions were being taken. So that was a huge negative in terms of our frustration and our inability, not only at CAA, but as a community, to actually understand how the Labour Party were operating their disciplinary processes, such as they were.
Well, I think that's all of the questions that we've got time for now. Thank you very much to everybody who's joined. And I think that, as will be clear to everybody reading the report now in their own time, and you can find all of the information that you need about the report. We'll be posting more and more analysis and information at antisemitism.org/EHRC. But I think what the report really does show, the debate is over. There was no smear campaign. This was a very real problem at the heart of British public life. It is a problem that festered for too long. It is a problem that made an entire community, an entire minority community in 21st century Britain question their place in this country, and I was one of them. And now that debate is over and it's time for justice to be done. I think we'll just close because with me just repeating the last line of our statement, because I think it's something that we can't say enough. We are immensely grateful to everyone who fought alongside us for this day to come. Too many of those who fought with us have suffered greatly for their principles. They are the very best of this country. Thank you very much for joining us.